Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Cloud Architects Podcast. I'm Chris Goosen, and as always, I'm joined by Nicholas Blank. Mr. Nick, you have a different background today, and you guys are always making fun of me for having different backgrounds, but you have a different background today. So
I do have a different background, and it's because I'm recording from our home studio, which sounds impressive, but you don't know what's in front of me, and as long as whatever behind me looks good, I think we're okay.
Right, as long as you've hidden everything under the desk, it's all good. That's what I've done.
Yes.
Right.
I have an array of children and dogs standing in front of me going and trying to keep quiet as best as they could.
Well, we're very exciting episode today, and I'm going to let Nick introduce our guest because I think Nick has been bouncing off the walls all week about this one. So I'm gonna not take his thunder here and let him introduce our guest, and we have an exciting topic to talk about today.
We do indeed, and this is something that I've only been quoting for a good 15 years at least. And it's wonderful to meet one of your intellectual heroes, and at least the person who originated the work that you've spent a lot of your career trying to implement and speaking about. So today we have the pleasure of speaking to John Kindervag, the creator of the Zero Trust framework. And John, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
John, we have many, many, many questions to ask you, and I think we just want to start in the beginning. And you originated the Zero Trust framework. And do you want to tell us why? And obviously we had the problem of data centers way back then. And tell us about your thinking and how you got to the solution of the three principles that we use.
Well, yeah, I come from a background as a network engineer and then a security engineer, security architect, pen tester, all the jobs that you do to learn about this business. And I used to install firewalls. And if you'll remember, and it's still true today, firewalls had a trust model built into them where there was, at least two interfaces, the untrusted interface that was going to the evil internet and the trusted interface that went to your internal network. And you gave the trusted interface a level of 100. It's 100% trusted. And then the external interface was 0. And then every other interface had another number between 0 and 100, and they couldn't be the same. And that was the trust model. It's called the adaptive security algorithm. And I hated it because what it said was that you didn't need to have a rule for outbound traffic because you're going from a high trust level to a low trust level. And anytime you're doing that, you don't need a rule. And I would keep trying to put rules in place because I was worried about data exfiltration, and I kept getting in trouble for going against what the vendor had said. And I said, this is silly. There is no such thing as trust in the digital world. We don't need a trust flag to move packets from point A to point B. All of the trust levels should be the same. It should be 0. And that's where it comes from. How much trust should there be in a digital system? 0, right? Because trust is binary. You either completely trust somebody or you don't. And it's really a human emotion, right? It's a human emotion that's been injected into digital systems for no reason at all. So my goal was if we could eliminate that, then that would force people to put policy in place that would benefit the organization. And it's really that simple. So when I got to Forrester Research in 2008, I was allowed to explore that. I don't think I would have been allowed to explore that concept if I wouldn't have gone to someplace like Forrester at the time that I went to Forrester. And I spent 2 years of doing primary research, talking to people all over the world, trying to see what holes were there, what I needed to look at. And then I published the first ever report called No More Chewy Centers in September of 2010. And I published the second report called Build Security into Your Network's DNA, the Zero Trust Network Architecture on how you should do it in November of 2010. So those first two reports came very, very quickly. 13 years ago, about this time of year. So I've been on this journey for a long, long time, and I continue on it, and I suspect I'll be on it for as long as I'm breathing.
What a great story. Chris?
No, I was just going to say, I think we seem to have a bit of a theme in our episodes lately where we're reminiscing about the days of old, right?
Yes.
And just thinking about, dinosaur stories, I think, as we call them, right? Thinking about how we used to do things. Now, I think what's interesting is that you did all of this work I would say a long time ago, right? 13 years is a relatively long time ago in technical terms, in technology terms. And it's only really the last probably 5 years or something like that we've really seen a lot of traction in the industry with zero trust, and where it's actually almost become a bit too buzzworthy, hasn't it? Because vendors are starting to look at this and go, well, we have zero trust. Come give us your money and we'll give you zero trust.
We'll sell you some zero trust.
There. Well, and zero trust for a long time was an iceberg. What you saw publicly was very small, and what was happening down below the scenes was very big. And some of us used to joke because I worked on all of the early zero trust networks around the world, and I went around the world, doing that. And we used to joke that zero trust was like Fight Club. The first rule was you don't talk about it. So people weren't talking about it. And what changed was the OPM data breach, if you remember that in the US, where the secret clearance, the information about people with secret clearance, 22 million people, was stolen by an adversarial nation state. And as a result of that, the United States House of Representatives did a very deep investigative report. And in that report, they asked that all federal government agencies be told that they need to adopt a zero trust architecture. And in fact, a man named Representative Jason Chaffetz, who was the chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee of the United States House of Representatives at that time, wrote a bylined article about zero trust, which this had never happened before, where a sitting member of Congress wrote about cybersecurity. And he said this: zero trust would have profoundly limited the attacker's ability to move within OPM's network and access such sensitive data. So the OPM breach, which got the head of OPM fired, directly led to the presidential executive order in 2021, where he talking about cybersecurity modernization, said all government agencies should move towards adopting zero trust architecture, which led to the OMB, Office of Management and Budget, guidance document M2209, which is the detailed document that says you have to do it. So now every federal government agency has a zero trust program management office, a zero trust program manager. They have budget allocated to it. So of course the vendors are going to come in and say, if you buy our product, you'll be all zero trusty. Now I will say, and I work at a vendor, right, that is involved in a zero trust ecosystem, but there's nothing that you can buy that is an easy button in terms of one thing and you're done, right? Zero trust isn't difficult. People make it more complex than it needs to be, but it's also not a product. It's a strategy designed to help you understand what you need to do from a cybersecurity perspective and resonate up to the highest levels of an organization so that you can change the incentive structure. That's what President Biden did. He changed the incentive structure from you guys can't talk about it at all to everybody talk about it all the time, right? And do it. And so incentives are really, really important in cybersecurity. And there's a misaligned incentive structure in a lot of organizations that lead to these significant cybersecurity incidents.
I love what you just said about incentive structure, because one of the things we struggle with is that security tends to be the forgotten stepchild of IT, and IT is not represented at the board. And then security becomes really relevant when there's something that happens to the business, like a breach. And this is a very, very real struggle where I talk to CISOs just about for a living at the moment. And a lot of the complaints are similar when I start by asking, what kind of board representation do you have in order to affect your role?
Well, you're exactly right. These things catch people off guard, right? If you're a big company who's had a data breach, that caught the CEO off guard. And if it didn't get them fired, which normally it does. It certainly damaged their reputation. It damaged the stock. The stock always comes back. People like to tell me, "Oh, John, the stock always comes back, so it's not that big of a deal." Yeah, well, buy low, sell high. Of course it comes back. But that doesn't mean there isn't significant damage. And now you see with the SEC coming out and becoming pretty litigious, Joe Sullivan over at Uber, Tim over at SolarWinds. We got to get ahead of this game somehow in the overall cyber world to figure out how we incentivize people to do the right thing, first of all, and then how we allow them to do the right thing and fund the right thing, and then who has to take responsibility for these events. So I tell people all the time, I wouldn't be a CISO today. That's just an awful job. It's paperwork, and you're the guy who ends up with the tracks of the bus going round and round on your back, right?
It's a good point, though, because I think for a lot of governments, I know we're seeing this in Australia, right, where the government's saying, well, we have to somehow make someone accountable for this, and so the finger gets pointed at the CISO, right? And legislation is now being brought in to say, well, it's the CISO's role. It's the CISO. Well, is it really? I mean, I don't. I agree with you. It's not really a job that I want because, anyway. I was gonna ask you where we are today. I mean, do you think the lack of awareness, if we can call it that, or the lack of adoption, do you think it's a confusion thing, or do you think it's lack of funding? Funding understanding. What do you think is sort of preventing everyone from just saying, you know what, this is the right answer. Let's go and get it done.
There's a lot of, that's not the way we've always done it before, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reticence there. There's a lot of fear that if it goes wrong, something goes wrong, I'm going to have to take the blame. So again, it goes back to incentives. And it's the fact that a lot of these people don't have any power to affect change. So I was just in New York City, and the CISO was very, very iffy. Oh, this is too hard, can't be done, blah, blah, blah. Well, the CIO was in the room, and I kind of looked over and made a couple comments. Yeah, no, of course we can do all these things in parallel. But everybody's afraid of kind of stepping out and doing, making the first move, right? And so we have to have a way to take away that fear so that people can do their job empowered to do the right thing for the organization. And they know what is the right thing to do, but they're afraid, right? People live in fear in a lot of these organizations. As one person said, one oopsie negates 1,000 attaboys. And I thought, that was last week. One oopsie negates 1,000 attaboys. So you're doing great. You're doing great. Oh, you did that one bad thing. Now, we're going to fire you. And so people are concerned about their jobs, as they rightly should be. And until we say, yeah, mistakes happen, right? I was once involved in a speaking engagement with the guy from Apollo 13, the guy who in the movie says, failure is not an option. Well, in talking to him, failure was an option. In fact, failure was probably the best option that they were going to get, but he was just trying to motivate people. It wasn't like he thought, well, for sure, if I just say that we're going to fix everything. They got really, really lucky, right, by the skin of their teeth. But sometimes failure is an option, and sometimes doing things that are pretty drastic are the best options. So we're coming up, it's Thanksgiving here in the U.S., and we have a thing called Black Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving Thursday. And cybersecurity, in my estimation, begins Black Friday of 2016 when the Target breach happened. And I say everything prior to that is BT, before Target, and we're actually here in the year, what year was that? I think it was 2013. I think we're in the year 10 AT. Don't have my notes in front of me, right? Our industry is only 10 years old because it was 10 years ago that for the first time, the CEO of a major organization got fired because something that IT did, right? And the only thing that IT can do to get the CEO fired is to allow a data breach. And if there is a data breach in your organization, you have policies in place that allowed it to happen. I like to say that all bad things happen inside the allow rule, right? Policy is binary. All we can do is allow or deny. And we allow way too much bad stuff because we're afraid we might stop the good stuff. And that's the fundamental problem. And we need to stop that particular thing. And we're seeing some of that in cloud too, where we're seeing, I know of one data breach where a lot of bad things happened. And when you read the legal documents, you can see that somebody thought security was slowing down DevOps. So we're just going to give everybody who has a domain credential access to this important data store inside of one of the public clouds. And one of those people was malicious and did bad things. And they weren't on a project where they needed to have access to that data. But hey, we're just going to open it up to everybody because we want speed, right?
Yeah.
You know, the DevOps people, I always joke they're the Ricky Bobbies of IT. They just want to go fast, right? Shake and bake. They got a cougar sitting next to them. I want to go fast. You guys familiar with the movie Ricky Bobby?
I love that movie. I watched it just like a week ago, so that's why I'm chuckling.
So you know, and it's just because I remember talking to a head of a development team. You know, I said, "What are you doing about cybersecurity in your product?" Well, nothing. Well, why not? Because I don't have any KPIs related to that. I have to push 12 new revs a day. That's all I care about. Well, what if there's a data breach? Well, I'll be gone. I'm only going to be at this job for 18 months, you know, at most. So, you know, I'm moving up the ladder. Well, okay, that's a perverse incentive that actually caused a pretty significant event.
I hear where you're coming from an incentive point of view, and I'd love to hear your thoughts around how Zero Trust is moving now that we have virtually ubiquitous attack surface with cloud workloads.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think trying to control the attack surface is a fool's errand. I consider the attack surface much like the universe; it's always expanding, right?
Yeah.
And so what Zero Trust has in it, with the main comment, and you know, I was appointed to the President of the United States NSTAC, National Security Telecommunications Advisory Council. Got to take a deep breath. Subcommittee on Zero Trust and Trusted Identity Access in 2021. So that was a subcommittee for the NSTAC. We issued a report to the president on that in 2022. You should send that out to your listeners. And that defines what Zero Trust is. That's the definitive document. It's on CISA's website. It was sponsored by the president of the United States. And it had, you know, the NSA, it had DISA, it had CISA, it had Chase Cunningham, Dr. Zero Trust, my guy who followed me up at Forrester. It had NIST, it had, you know, all, and a lot of big vendors. So we can say authoritative, that's what it is. And the fundamental concept that I documented there was an idea that I came up with a long time ago called a protect surface. Instead of worrying about the attack surface, let's define a protect surfaces. So protect surfaces are the concept that I can shrink the attack surface down orders of magnitude to something very small and easily known called a protect surface, and segment that away from everything else and write policy around it. And now I'm controlling an individual, what is known as a DAS element. So DAS is data, applications, assets, or services, an easy to remember mnemonic that helps you know what you need to put into a protect surface. So you put a single DAS element into a single protect surface, and you build out your Zero Trust environment, whether it's in the cloud, on premise, it doesn't matter. Protect surfaces are independent of the location of compute, so that we can build these out, and they become three things. They can become incremental. We're doing them one at a time, iterative, one after another, and therefore it's non-disruptive, because the most I can screw up is one protect surface. And so by looking at it that way, we can really change the dynamic. So if you do credit card processing, I'm a former QSA. I used to do a lot of work in PCI. I learned how to protect a single DAS element, a binary data string called a personal account number that we colloquially call PCI data. And so if I need to protect my PCI data store, I put all my PCI infrastructure into a single protect surface. I segment that off. I have rules that allow only certain users or resources to access that protect surface. And now the friction of getting to that is really, really high if you're unauthorized to do that, right? And so you can get into these cool things where you'll see it happening in real life. I mean, I left Forrester, went to Palo Alto Networks for 4 years as the field CTO. Then I went to a company called Ontoit, a Dutch managed services company where we built a zero trust focused managed service. And then I came over here to Illumio to re-engage with the segmentation stuff that I started talking about in 2010. But each one of those things are a conscious part of my own zero trust journey to push the envelope of how we can use technology and build these things more easily. And in the managed service, we had such visibility, we could see what was happening. And we never, in anything that we managed, we never had an actual ransomware outbreak, for example, because there were no rules that allowed the command and control server on the public internet on an unknown IP address with no user identity fidelity to have access to the protect surface. That rule just doesn't exist. So how are they going to drop the malware across? You know, and even if they come in and plug it in with a USB drive, which everybody always, well, they could bring it in with the ubiquitous USB key. How does that malware call out to the command and control server? Because there's no rule allowing unknown software on protect surface PCI to go to an unknown resource on the internet. It would just be stopped because what's this? We don't know about it. There's no policy for it. So it becomes very simple when you start looking at it from that perspective.
I really like, you said a few things there that I think kind of really resonated with me. And one was, it doesn't really matter about the location of where things are, right? Because I think we've too long, we've lived in this world where folks want to hug their infrastructure and go, okay, well, this is my data center. That's my firewall right over there. That's the thing. That's the gatekeeper, right? But in our cloud world, that really isn't true anymore. We have work from home scenarios. We have folks working from wherever, and I love that. I love the sort of the breakdown of that, because shrink it by having an allow surface. I think it just makes great sense to me. I really like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, if you can invert things, right? The problem statement, invert it, is a good rule of thumb. The attack surface, the inversion of that is the protect surface. It's the exact opposite. You've kind of reached in and you pulled it out from the inside out, and now what I found was in a properly built zero trust environment, we didn't have to worry about what's the latest attack because it was irrelevant because there were no rules. I'll just tell you a story here from a number of years ago, but it was a project that I worked on, and the CISO called me and he said, well, I had the penetration test on the zero trust thing. I'm like, okay, I'm really interested in how this works because I'm a former penetration tester and I kind of know how a lot of that works. And I run this all by a bunch of my friends who were pen testers too. And he said, so I had the pen tester try to get in and he couldn't get in the normal ways, right? And he was very frustrated. He said, okay, I need a domain credential. Sure, I'll give you a domain credential. He gave him a domain credential, but because there was no policy attached to that domain credential, he didn't have access to anything. And the pen tester finally got really frustrated. He said, I can't go anywhere. What are you trying to do? Make me look bad? And the CISO said, yes, I am. That's my job.
Yes.
Policy or users that don't have a policy attached to them can't do anything on the network, right? And what we do typically is we validate the user and then we give them access to everything. So Snowden and Manning, the two most famous names, I call them the Beyonce and the Rihanna of cybersecurity, right? They're one-word people. And yet they were trusted users on trusted devices. They had robust identity systems and powerful but cumbersome multi-factor authentication, but nobody looked at their packets post authentication. And they gave them access to everything on this super secret network that they should have never had access to in the first place. So if you 2 years ago, I was going through a process of getting my clearance for the government, and it was it's just a pain, and everybody seems to want that. They feel like it's a badge of honor. And I said to them, am I ever going to need to have access to any of your data to do this work for you? And they said, well, no. I said, well, then we're in violation of the first principle of zero trust. Don't give people access to data they don't need to do their job. And I'm not going to go get my clearance. They're like, they'd never had anybody say, I don't want a clearance. I'm like, no, because that's a violation of this idea that is my life, that you don't give people access to things they don't need in order to do their job. And if you look at it from that perspective, like in my job now, I have need for very little access, right? And they give me great access to the things I need. I need to be able to book travel, do expense reports, make PowerPoint presentations, and write blog posts. I mean, that's kind of my life, right?
Yes.
So I don't need access to the financials or anything like that. Or, I mean, why would they ever give that to me? They shouldn't, and they don't. And that's the right answer to the question.
So, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And one of the things you talked about, John, and you've used this word a few times now, is journey, right? And obviously we always think of, Nic and I like to think of Zero Trust as a journey for an organization. It's never complete. It's always something that they're kind of working on. But you yourself have also had, obviously a fascinating journey. We talked about Forrester, we talked about Arlo. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you're doing now and some of the research that you've been involved with more recently?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I'm doing right now. So first of all, I'm the chief evangelist at Illumio, which is a company that I've known since they started in 2013 to do microsegmentation for Zero Trust. So of course, it's called Zero Trust microsegmentation. And I'm really coming back to the roots of what I said in 2010 in Build Security into Your Network's DNA. And in there, I said, all modern networks must be segmented by default. That's just, if you have a flat network, you may pay the bills, but the attackers own it, right? And I know that from pen testing. Flat networks, that was like, oh man, that was a gourmet meal for us. And so I wanted to come back to that because everybody's saying, well, you just need identity. Identity is something that is consumed as a signal in policy, in a zero trust policy, but it doesn't really enforce anything, and it's hugely broken in my opinion. So I want to take some of that narrative back so that people can actually get real things done. Start by segmenting your network so that you can put these protect surfaces in a way that keeps them from the rest of the attack surface, right? And then we'll use identity signals to determine the policy, but it's consumed. It's not equal to zero trust. And so that's why I came there. And then the other thing that I do is I'm an advisor to the Cloud Security Alliance. I advise them on their zero trust working group and work with Jim, the CEO, and Alina, the president, on a lot of different things, give speeches for them, help write research, help kind of guide a lot of the research that they're doing, because it's a huge, wonderful volunteer organization with a tremendous number of contributors who are really passionate about this. But sometimes they'll hear something, from the playground, and I'll say, well, that's not really true. Let's kind of re-engage with that. So it's super fun to kind of help educate a new generation of people. And we've come out with a CCZT curriculum for a certification of competency in zero trust from the Cloud Security Alliance. You can go out and get that certification. And I'm actually CCZT number 1. So I have the first of those certifications.
That's wonderful.
And that's my only certification that I have. Everything else I've given up over the years.
Yes, I'm a proud NT4M CSE. And then I became a Microsoft certified master, and that died. And since then, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. So after that, I'm kind of done with certifications for a while as well.
At some point in your career, you don't need those to get through the gatekeepers at HR.
This is true.
Yeah.
So you told us earlier that you're still researching. Aren't we done with Zero Trust?
Are you done living? Are you done breathing?
What a great answer.
I mean, you're never done with it. In fact, one of the things about a Zero Trust system, it is that as you look at the signals, you can take all those signals, all that telemetry, the logs, everything, and we would define those as stressors. And you can re-inject it back into the system to build things out. You get visibility in terms of how you can make things more mature over time. So I need to add something to the protect surface. I need to change a policy. I need a different kind of control to be added to this, whatever it is. And this makes Zero Trust an anti-fragile system. So if you know of the book Anti-Fragile by Taleb, the guy who wrote Black Swan, he gave me the vocabulary to talk about what I've been trying to create in Zero Trust, which is the idea that a system under load can adapt and get stronger, right? If you think about, I need to lose some weight because it's been Christmas and I ate too many pies or whatever. What do? You go stress your body out. You diet, stressing your body out, making it hungry. You go out and run, stressing your body out. You lift weights. Whatever you do, those are stressors, but your body adapts to that and becomes stronger, not weaker, right? And so that's what I've been trying to articulate in Zero Trust is it gets stronger and stronger over time. And so articulating that and then the right way to measure that through maturity, I built a maturity model. And you should also share with your listeners an article I wrote for the Cloud Security Alliance called Understanding the Two Zero Trust Maturity Models. It's about how you use the CISA maturity model with the original Forrester one that I created back in the day. And I will say that as you build things out one protect surface at a time, you should measure the maturity of that protect surface one at a time. And then out of that, you can send those signals to the pillar model of CISA and see how your entire estate is looking over time.
That's amazing. John, we want to respect your time and that we're coming up to the top of the hour. And I feel like we could have a 2-hour episode, but we just can't. So before we let you go, we'd love to ask you, what is it that you'd like to plug? And that can be absolutely anything. It could be your LinkedIn URL. It could be some research that you'd like to share. The floor is yours.
Well, look, I want to plug just the concept of segmenting networks again. We flatten them out, and that's why I came here, because we need to segment these networks. And by the way, there's a network in the cloud, right?
Yes.
This is one of the misunderstandings. I had to quit saying Zero Trust networks, and I say Zero Trust environments because I would have people angry at me. Well, I don't have a network. I'm in the cloud. And I remember one conversation with someone, and I said, well, but there's a network in the cloud. No, there's not. There's no networks in the cloud. I said, pretty sure there's networks in the cloud. They have switches and routers. No, they don't. Okay. And then this person said, they don't even have servers. And I said, oh, really? And they said, yes. Haven't you heard of serverless? The way they said it to me, like, you moron, haven't you heard of serverless? I said, yes, I have heard of serverless. Where do you think they store the data then? Oh, it's stored in DNA. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Good. Well, you've been watching a lot of Black Mirror or something, right? I mean, I don't know where you're getting that stuff from, but there are networks in the cloud, and they work exactly as the networks that you have on premise. The cloud is someone else's hypervisor, right? And, Linus Torvalds should be the richest person in the world because he created Linux, which led to all these innovations. And without him, we wouldn't have this stuff. But at the same time, that is the good thing, because it means that the protect surface is independent of the compute and the infrastructure. We don't care where it's located, but it still needs to be segmented away from everything else so that only authorized users in authorized circumstances through specific allow-only policies can get access to that resource. And that core technology that does that is called segmentation. And that's why I came to Illumio.
Wonderful. John, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'd love to have, I think we could have a show for a number of the things that you've said separately, just to unpack those, because there's so much depth in all of them, including where to start, where to finish, where to measure, but we would never get off the show. So,
well, we'll follow up with some other shows in 2024, right?
Yeah, we'd love to have you on again.
Well, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. Thank you very much. It's very, very informative. And it's just a great way to unpack some of these concepts, right? I think a lot of people are scared off by some of these things. And when you're able to just lay it out in the way that you just have, it makes a lot more sense. And I think it's going to resonate a lot better with a lot of folks.
Agree. Unnecessarily afraid.
Yes. Well, thank you, Chris and Nic, for having me on. I really, really appreciate it. Chris, are you staying in the U.S. through the holiday, or?
Yeah. Heading back just after Thanksgiving.
Okay. Well, have a happy Thanksgiving and safe travels back to Australia. I'm from Texas, and I consider Australia to be the Texas of the South Pacific because everybody's super friendly and they barbecue a lot.
That's very spot on, actually. I actually spent some time living in Texas myself, and I actually once had someone say to me, "It's like, you came from Australia and you picked the most Aussie place to live in the United States."
There you go.
Well, there you go. So anyway, so yeah, I'm looking forward to some football this weekend, and on Friday anyway, and hopefully some turkey on Thursday. So we'll see.
There you go. Okay.
Thank you, John. Great to meet you, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.